Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Okay. All right. So we are live now. So excellent. Uh, Great. Thank you for the heads up. We are ready to start. I really apologize for the spot of bother. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining today. Let's dive right in. Really, I'm going to walk you guys through a presentation. Just a quick, walk you guys through. Really, these are significant and momentous times, and I wanted to make sure we summarize some of the things we are hearing and knowing and learning from across the app industry right now, right? And just to summarize while my page loads, and what we do know is really the IDFA is just getting phased out. So hopefully you guys are seeing my screen. Uh, so rather than it being phased out, it's just being made into uh, opt-in thing, and that's going to be effective September. I want to take this moment to talk through what we know, what we don't know, and what we are still learning, right? And really, that's really the whole point. And I want to impart, hopefully, a summary of everything we do know and everything we don't know today. So thank you for joining today, and we should be live in just a moment. Thank you for your patience thus far with our small audio visual travails, and we should be, yeah, right. So I've structured this so as to, yeah, we are rolling. Excellent. Good. Uh, yeah, and I realize the screen's loading still. But broadly, I'm going to talk about A, what's changing, how the different people in and different parts of the ecosystem are getting impacted by what is changing. And we will share this deck in YouTube and on our email list and on our blog. So please look out for that. We will also share a full transcript just as well. Right. So hopefully, yeah. So a little bit about me. We'll go right in. Right. So let's just jump right in. Hopefully, this is visible on your screens just as well. So here's what's going to happen. And this is going to happen in September 2020 uh, with iOS 14. This was announced on Monday, right? So this was announced this Monday. So this is all very new. Every app will throw up this prompt that says, basically, should we allow your app to track a video, track your IDFA or not? That's what's going to happen starting Monday, starting September, right? And and every user can also see what data is tracked for them by these apps. Now, obviously, you could say what percentage of users will say allow tracking and what percentage are going to say not to track. I would say uh, we know that we have similar data for push notifications. That's in the past. Uh, as you can see, push notifications, we had about 40 to 60% opt-in rates. We know that GDPR is 70 to 90%. We know that GDPR, nobody really fully complied, whereas, and we do fully expect that the IDFA opt-in is going to be far, far less than the PN number, right? So we expect it to be far, far less than 40%. So if you're like, hey, this may or may not happen, some people may opt in, it's going to be far less than 40%, and which basically means this is going to be completely useless. Uh, it's helpful to look at some of the background of how we got here. This was really how we got here really started in 2012 when Apple phased out the UDID and started the IDFA. They had a LAT at the time, right? But you could literally not find the LAT at the time. In 2016, you could Apple said you could put the LAT to be 0. Basically, Apple said, okay, so if a user opts out of LAT, then or turns on LAT, then their IDFA is going to show up as 0, and these people cannot be tracked. And even right now, like 30% of users, their LAT cannot be tracked right now. 2019, the kids apps cannot be tracked. In 2019, Apple said, hey, kids apps cannot use IDFA to track. Right now, of course, IDFA is completely off just now, right? So this has been a gradual process. And, in many ways, we saw this coming. And really, this is going to be definitive, and this is going to be a very monumental change. What's also happening is there's something called the SK ad network that Apple is building. The deal is, this is SK ad network. You would think, hey, the SK ad network is basically what an MMP is, but you also realize it's very, very rudimentary compared to what an MMP is, right? So you see it's ad network, source apps, advertised apps. And we also know that an ad network, Apple does not have a good track record of building ad tech. iAd was terrible. Search ads is very funky. It's just not great. So we know that it's just not anywhere comparable, going to be anywhere comparable to what the MMPs have built out or some of the infrastructure that folks have built out. So, however, the SK ad network does have an API. It can potentially enable building of third-party solutions on top of it. And I think that is a significant opportunity. That is a void that many of the MMPs can fill. Now, here's how we see what happens to the different folks in the mobile app ecosystem, the different parts of the mobile app ecosystem. I will say I've talked to very many people. A lot of these things are still speculative at this point. There are some things which we know for a fact, some things that we know for sure, but a lot of things are TBD. So I'm going to try to mark what is TBD and what is known for a fact, right? What happens to all of these people, right? Number one, MMPs. MMPs right now operate primarily on account of their IDFAs. In the current incarnation, they just can't work. We know that. We know that just because if 10% of people opt in, they're just not going to work. What is TBD? They can build different tooling because they do have the data infrastructure, uh, but is the different tooling going to be based on SK ad network? Exactly how sophisticated is it going to be? And is this going to result in the same level of performance? Without the IDFA, you can't track or optimize in anywhere comparable to the same manner. So is this going to result in the same kind of performance? That's really the TBD, right? So that's number one. Number two, Facebook and Google, these are the big players in the ecosystem. What we know is they still control powerful user graphs. They have massive purchase data. We do know that Facebook SDK relies heavily on IDFA. Google's tracking relies heavily on IDFA, but their user graphs are less powerful without IDFA. We also know that web-based businesses can scale on Facebook and Google without anything comparable to an MMP. I think this is going to be the closest to what we could see the mobile ecosystem evolve as going forward, uh, operating very similarly to what web-based systems operate as today. We also know that Apple Search Ads allows you to show ads to users who have LAT on, who have opted into privacy. These are less targeted, but that could definitely happen. The targeting is going to be less precise. The performance is going to be worse. We do know that Facebook and Google could just operate just as they are without really LAT, really, right? So that's a very real possibility. What is speculative? What could happen? And these are things we are hearing about from people. Is that Facebook and Google could use an alternative in-house device graph without IDFA. This could very well happen because Facebook has Facebook ID, which is very distinct. Can Facebook use the FB graph and build some sort of a proxy quasi fingerprinting system to target users? It's very realistically possible. We know from a lot of people we know at Facebook that that this is very, very high priority for them. What they can also do is use purely contextual aggregate level data that is not IDFAs. So that is very realistically possible just as well. What's possible is also that they can strike side deals with Apple to run via SK ad network. Uh, that's very realistically possible. And we do know that Facebook is one of the beta testers for SK ad network, which could mean two things, right? So which could mean, A, they are on par with all of the other ad networks out there, all of the other SDK networks, all of the other DSPs out there. But it could also mean that, hey, because they have so many more resources, they get to plug into SK ad networks in a very preferential position. I think the bigger question is what happens to CPMs and ROAS without user level data? Facebook cannot do value bidding. Facebook cannot set up value-based lookalikes. And we know it's very realistic to speculate that CPMs will go down. It's very realistic to speculate, to think that the ROASs will go down, the performance will suffer. It's definitely something we are hearing, right? Next is DSPs. Uh, what we do know is a lot of the user level data is not going to work. Retargeting can work via IDFVs, but then again, it's not something that developer can use, can hand off to a DSP and say, hey, you use this. It's going to be useless to a DSP when they want to target across advertisers, when they want to target across companies, right? So a DSP, so retargeting, there is a possibility within a company. We still have to figure out what that looks like eventually. TBD, again, when you're reliant only on contextual signals, you're relying on lat long, you're relying on time of the day, you're relying on when have you seen this particular uh, user profile, but you don't know if it's the exact same user that's coming in. We don't know if this is the exact same user that made a $5,000 purchase or $200 purchase in the past. What happens, right? So the performance is going to go down. And we do see that CPMs are going to go down. We do think that the ad monetization revenues are going to drop. So there is going to be a very significant shakeup. Now, do we think that programmatic can work without IDFAs? Possibly. We just think there's going to be a larger learning curve. There's going to be a longer learning phase that's going to be required before a DSP, before the programmatic ecosystem can really work, right? The next part of the ecosystem is really ad monetization. Really, SDK ad networks can't operate. Header bidding, unified auctions really become meaningless because all of these are operating at the user level. TBD, contextual non-personalized ads. We know that Apple search has contextual non-personalized ads right now that are shown to users who have LAT on. Again, it's very likely that at least in the short term, while people figure out what happens, there will be a drop in CPMs, there will be a drop in ad monetization revenues, right? So again, some of this look like dark times. These look like signals that things will not be very good. And frankly, I think we as an industry have to figure out a lot of what happens going forward. There's some good news, and I will come to that in the upcoming slides. Again, what happens to Android, right? Android, the good news so far is Android has no plans to make this opt-in. We know that Android opt-out rates are much, much lower. Android is impacted to a far lesser extent than iOS right now. However, we do know that Android has followed iOS when it comes to anti-privacy pressures. It's likely that they will follow with something like this. And I will also take a step back and say, look, I'm presenting a lot of questions and TBDs, and I'm collecting a lot of resources, a lot of questions. And it is because when I talk to a lot of people, nobody has definitive answers. And if people say they have definitive answers, I'm sorry, I think they're delusional right now, given everything we are going through as an industry and space, right? So a lot is changing, a lot will shake up. We will share more as we go ahead, as we find out more. We are putting together a resource on everything we do know, everything we are getting to know. We will share that shortly. But so far, there are more questions than answers right now. What we do know about user acquisition and marketing teams, right? Again, the nature of user acquisition and marketing teams is that it is going to become more like traditional marketing orgs, really, right? So there have been huge marketing teams in the past. A canonical example of that just being what Machine Zone was doing at its peak, having hundreds of people in its media buying organization. Media buying was marketing, really. That is going to change. We don't know what without an IDFA, there's just not going to be very clear, deterministic understanding of marketing impact. We're not going to be able to say this user drove so much. We're going to be able to say more like at the campaign level, at the aggregate level, right? So that's what a lot of marketing is going to look like. A lot of people that started off as being in Excel sheets optimizing, that has been phased out over the last couple of years. That is going to change. We are going to see something more comparable to traditional marketing orgs as we go forward. And yes, I think there's been a lot of brouhaha about marketing is dead, user acquisition is dead. I don't think that's going to come to pass. because Apple has too much in the game, has a huge part of its revenues coming from apps. Facebook has a lot of revenue coming from apps. Google has a lot of revenue coming from apps. All of us marketers, participants in the mobile marketing ecosystem, have a lot that is riding on what is happening. I think there's just too much skin in the game for the entire mobile app ecosystem to be completely annihilated. I don't think that's going to happen. Marketing will be here. We will just need different tools for a post IDFA world. A lot of the tools we have right now, MMPs, mobile DSPs, everything is built on top of IDFAs. Those will not work anywhere as well. We will all need to pivot. As I've expressed, UA and marketing teams will need to pivot. MMPs will need to pivot. Uh, we will all need to change. We will all need to ask questions. Uh, and I think we have more questions than answers at this point of time. Uh, you know, we will continue to share details as we go forward. We have some resources in this deck that we will share just as well, right? I think it's also helpful to ask what are people's incentives to sharing the opinions that they are sharing. It's useful and important to ask yourself how well things play out because nobody knows for sure. And I do think there will be opportunities, right? Something Arthur C. Clarke said, when somebody states that something is impossible, it's very probably wrong. Marketing's going to stay, mobile apps are going to stay. We need to figure out solutions as we go forward. And I remain optimistic. I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity here as we go forward. To wrap up, and that's all I had for today. To wrap up, there are very many resources that we will share, both on our email list and in this YouTube and on the podcast. Really, I think a lot of thanks to Mobile Dev Memo for the great job folks there have done in sharing very, very openly. And what I've done is to present and synthesize a lot of things that we have learned. It's very helpful to look at some of the episodes of the Mobile User Acquisition Show, some background on LAT in this episode with Thomas Petit, some background on how you could create cross-channel attribution in the way that folks at Slack have done. This could be interesting for you guys to look at just as well. Something else to also look at could just be what the MMPs have put out. I think there are signals of optimism. I don't see any concrete solutions at this point. Uh, Again, I think that there's a lot of changes afoot, a lot of changes are coming up, and we are definitely looking forward to presenting to you what we find, what we see, what we find out. Uh, Again, please feel free to reach out. Please feel free to share any questions in the comments or just send me a note on shamant@rocketship.hq.com. Send us a note in the comments on YouTube just as well, YouTube or the podcast just as well. Very much looking forward to hearing any inputs, any firsthand experiences from a lot of you guys, because clearly these are challenging times and we hope to negotiate and navigate all of this with you, fabulous people. Thank you for tuning in today. I look forward to bringing to you more updates and further updates from everything that is changing, everything that is getting updated. Right? Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm going to be around for a couple more minutes. If you guys have questions, please feel free to ask in the comments. I will, look forward to being in touch. Kevin, good question about Kevin's asking, Bravo Kevin's asking, hey, do you think companies will try to set attribution themselves, first party? I think you still need to collect some sort of identifier to set attribution for yourself. I don't know if that's possible. I would love to hear if you think that is within the realm of possibilities. Uh, yeah, right, because you couldn't collect. I mean, if you could collect first party data, email of some sort, anything other than IDFA, maybe using Facebook login, that's a possibility. But I don't see how any way which that might be possible though. All right, cool. I'm going to sign off now, but I will be on the Mobile Dev Memo Slack channel. So please feel free to hit me up if you guys have questions there. And of course, please feel free to hit me up if you guys have any questions on email and so on and so forth as well. I'm going to sign off for now. Have a great rest of your evening, you guys. Yeah, and these are interesting times that I'm sure we will all come out on the other side. Right, thank you.